Finally today, the conflict in Ukraine is rumbling on, very relevant, of course, to this energy crisis. Over the past few days, we've seen a number of developments, including two huge explosions at a Russian airbase in Crimea. Attention has turned to the south of Ukraine, with Ukraine's armed forces launching a counterattack in the Kherson region. Attacks on bridges along the Dnieper River have left Russian forces cut off from their supply lines. Well, joining me to discuss these latest developments is Keir Giles, a senior consulting fellow of the Russia and Eurasia programme at Chatham House. And Keir, I suppose the big question is, there's a divide among the West. Some countries talk in the language of Ukraine being able to win this war. Others talk in terms of managing some sort of settlement. What is your assessment in terms of whether or not Ukraine could actually defeat Russia?
Well, the problem with that divide you just described, Tom, is it is exactly the same challenge that Ukraine has faced from day one of this conflict. And the divide is always along the same lines. There are those countries that recognize that the fighting might be in Ukraine, but that's actually just the front line for the whole of Europe. And this is all of our fight to protect all of us against Russia. And then those countries that are protected by distance from what Russia does and would much rather go back to business as usual as soon as possible and haven't learned from experience that would just mean Russia saving up for another day when it can launch another offensive against Europe. That determines who's supporting Ukraine the strongest. It also determines who is trying to push Ukraine forward towards actually winning a victory in a way that is undeniable in Russia itself, and who instead just wants to bring the fighting to an end as quickly as possible, even if it leaves Russia thinking that they have actually won. But you're right, the nature of the conflict is changing all the time. We've seen despair change to optimism several times through this conflict. And what's happening now, this gearing up apparently for a major offensive by Ukraine in Kherson in the south, pushing forwards and recapturing, liberating those occupied territories where Russian forces have been now for several months, is being accompanied by these long-range strikes that you mentioned. A demonstration by Ukraine that they can hit serious and important and critically important targets deep in Russia's rear, in Crimea, the vital bridges for supplies coming into those Russian forces that are on the Ukrainian banks of the Dnieper River, and so on. So, yes, Ukraine certainly wants everybody to think that there is a major offensive coming, and certainly Russia seems to have convinced. The British Ministry of Defense is saying Russia is moving forces southwards from that offensive of their own in the east of the country, in Donbass, in order to prepare for this offensive coming in. But we still don't know for certain what exactly lies behind that big news of the last couple of days, that strike on major Russian airbase in Crimea. Everybody's still guessing how exactly Ukraine did that and with what.